for the Facebook Live notification to drop. Here we go. All right. Hi, everyone joining us on Facebook. Great to see you. Great to have you here. This is the virtual reading of the First Person Narratives of Mental Illness workshop hosted by NAMI-NYC. My name is Clara. I'm the Public Education Event Coordinator, and I'm going to be moderating this evening. We are so happy that you're here and that you're joining us. We're really excited to share our readers' work with you. I'm going to start off with just a quick introduction to NAMI-NYC. Then I'm going to turn it over to Cynthia, our workshop facilitator, and who's going to give us a little introduction to the event overall. And then we are going to turn it over to our guest of honor, our readers. So the host of this, one of the co-hosts of this event, in addition to the Queen's Council for the Arts, whose funding made possible this workshop, the co-host of this event is NAMI-NYC, the National Alliance on Mental Illness of New York City. We are a grassroots mental health organization. We provide support, education, and advocacy for all individuals and families impacted by mental illness, which means that we have free classes, free support groups, and other services that are currently being offered virtually. We're offering support groups and classes and things remotely through Zoom. And we would love to have you join us at any of those events. You can find out more about our services by going to NAMI-NYC.org. Specifically, if you want to find out more about our calendar of events, including events like this one, you can go to NAMI-NYC.org/calendar. You can also call our helpline, which is open 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday by calling 212-684-3264 or emailing helpline@naminyc.org. All of our programs are peer-led, and this event, I think, is a great example of the way that we try to value lived experience and the things that people go through and their ability to sort of share those experiences and hear from other people who have gone through something similar. So all of our support groups and classes are peer-led, including our support groups for family members and friends who are looking for ways to better support people in their lives that may be struggling. So that's a little bit about us, about NAMI-NYC. If you have questions about that, please feel free to put them in the chat as well, or go to our website or one of the other resources that I mentioned. But that, I think, is enough from me. I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Cynthia-Marie O'Brien, who is our facilitator and will be kicking us off this evening.
Thank you, Clara. Hi, everyone. I'm Cynthia-Marie O'Brien, and I'd like to welcome you to this reading. As Clara mentioned, this is the culmination of a 5-week writing workshop on writing first-person narratives of mental illness, and we worked in genres from poetry to memoir, on all sorts of mental illness, ranging from anxiety to schizophrenia. This project is a new work grant that I received from the Queen's Council on the Arts, so I'd like to thank them and the public funds that were received from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. And of course, I'd like to thank everyone at NAMI for their incredible collaboration. This workshop came out of my own desire to share my story of living with bipolar disorder and my desire to empower others to also share their stories. I truly believe that first-person narratives of mental illness are essential, both to help those with mental illness know we are not alone and to educate those who don't share our experiences, but perhaps treat us or support us. I think they're also very important to break down stereotypes among those who may even be afraid of us. Wherever you are coming from tonight, I hope these narratives make you think and move you. Thank you for being here to witness these stories. We'll have 9 readings by workshop participants who I'm incredibly proud of. You're gonna witness their amazing vulnerability. And we're gonna conclude with a reading by myself. Because seeing yourself represented in literature is so important, I'm also printing a chapbook with more of the participants' work. And if you'd like to purchase one for $10, you can please reach out to me at Cynthia-MarieO'Brien.com and I'll ship it to you. Thank you again for your presence here tonight, and let's get started.
Thank you, Cynthia. And I will put my email, if you want to put your contact information for folks that may be interested in the chapbook into the chat. And I'll also put my email, CKIELY@NAMI-NYC.org in the chat, so that people can reach out with any questions or to request the book. Without further ado, I'm really happy to introduce our first reader, Ebony Johnson.
Hello, everyone. I'll start with my first essay. It's titled Childhood. My introduction to mental health was as a child enjoying Brooklyn in the 90s, running around the play equipment that we called toys, eating 50-cent cherry ices, and clowning each other whenever the air felt dull. Kids often joked about who belonged in the G building, what everyone called the psychiatric ward of Kings County Hospital. I didn't understand it as a place of treatment. The way my childhood friends described it, it always sounded like a jail. It was always referred to as an insult. The butt of a cruel joke followed by uncontrollable shrills only children can produce. Words that cut and scrape and stain in ways a not yet fully developed mind can truly begin to understand. I always sat there observing, understanding when it was my cue to belt out a full-bodied laughing fit. The G building felt like a place of unspeakable horrors. Whatever my young mind could conjure up was synonymous to what I imagined could be a scene from Frankenstein. Stormy nights and judgmental spectators. Similar to the nameless monster, I imagined doctors restoring pieces together to fashion what they thought may be normal. Perhaps they too were fascinated by an individual's ability to follow orders without fully understanding a person's emotions. Furthermore, the endless jokes provided insight into the kind of person who would end up at such a place. An unbecoming or violent person who needs to be put away for their own good, as not to harm you. The messaging was clear. Those who belong there deserve to be there. Thus, I spent years associating mental health with a type of criminality I could never understand. It evoked an emotion that I could only verbalize when I got older as fear. The other ways I thought of psychiatric centers were from movies and books, generally geared for white audiences. Looking at psychiatric centers through this gaze, I could see the suffering. I could see the loneliness and cries for help. I could see a full person getting treatment. Albeit not completely without stigma, but still able to be in a place that's understood for healing. And if this was not displayed, as a consumer, you rooted for the underdog. You rooted for the patient receiving unfair treatment. These images never match what my friends and I understood of those who belong in the G building. Never. And my second piece is a poem titled High Functioning. A brain on autopilot can accomplish extraordinary feats. Practicing magic, I'm in two places at once. A place in my mind where my imagination, whether creative or anxious, can play. And a place where others require me to be. It allows me to purse my lips in such a way that one may mistake as a smile. The disappearing act involves burying trauma and sadness, unfit for the rooms I travel in. I learned at a young age, your emotions can make people uncomfortable. But when you bite your tongue and swallow blood, you're celebrated for strength. That's it.
Thank you. Our audience wants to show some fingers, show some applause. I think that's a great way to thank our readers for their work. Next, we have Hani Markel.
Hi, so my first poem that I'm going to be reading is called The OCD Countdown. 10. The number of times I've scrubbed my hand since I got back from the laundry room next to the lobby 5 flights down and used the elevator. I don't remember if I touched the buttons, so 9. I wiped down my wallet, cell phone, apartment key, laundry card, detergent, pocket of change, 3 quarters and a dime, until they are just clean enough. 8. I arranged plans to meet with Nella and Lauren for dinner at an Italian restaurant on Wednesday night. I make an appointment for the dentist, 2 years behind for a cleaning, and cancel 15 minutes later because there may not be enough time for me to get there after work if the subway's delayed. I reschedule for the next hour. 4:30. 4:30. I must have something at 4:30. That sounds familiar. I leave a voicemail for the receptionist to find out if there's availability for next month. I invite 3 more friends for dinner because I don't want them to feel left out. It all feels too overwhelming, so I postpone dinner and call the dentist back to cancel. 7. The Sabbath is a day of rest. Note, no technology, no television, no email, no obsessive Google searches, no color-coded work spreadsheets, no compulsive cell phone checking. The Sabbath, my single day of respite. 6. 6 days a week of counting, wandering, wondering, thinking, counting, repeating. 5. My job offers 7 annual sick days, minus the inevitable 2, where my cold or flu or fever or sickness is imagined, and I take off anyway. 4. Doorknob, sinks, counters, refrigerator door, the nightly disinfecting ritual. 3. There are certain rules that are never meant to be broken, no matter how tired you are. Even if you're already in bed, lights dimmed, under the cozy comforter, book in hand. Always make sure to lock the door, check the stove, check the oven. 2. Inhale, exhale, repeat, breathe. 1. I hear many voices telling me that the world is a dangerous place. My hands aren't clean. My body is not to be trusted. But I believe the still voice inside of me, the only voice that is truly my own. And for once, I decide to listen. So that was my first poem. My second one is called Vidoy, My Stuttering Confession. This poem is modeled after a well-known prayer called Vidoy, Hebrew for confession, recited on Yom Kippur, the Jewish holiday of atonement. During Vidoy, worshipers gently beat themselves on the chest for each transgression listed, believed to be symbolic punishment for our hearts. The Vidoy prayer includes the Ashamnu portion, an alphabetical acrostic listing different sins. It is written in first person plural, because while everyone may not have committed these specific sins, the Jewish community as a collective surely have, and it is believed that the fates of the lives of the Jewish people are intertwined on this day. Just like the Ashamnu portion is written in the first person plural, so too is my stuttering confession, because it represents my individual confessions related to stuttering and anxiety, as well as confessions representing the entire stuttering community. I put a slight spin on the traditional Vidoy prayer because I included some positive confessions or assertions. We have been anxious and ashamed. We have broken eye contact. We have chased fluency relentlessly and failed. We have dreamed of futures where stuttering is viewed as a difference, not a disorder. We have been embarrassed. We have been frustrated by constant rumination and obsessive thoughts about our speech. We have been granted a gift that helps shape the narrative of our lives. We have hesitated, paused, circumlocuted, and stalled. We have instilled confidence. We have been jealous of our fluent friends. We have been knocked down again and again. We have lied about our name. We have managed to pretend that everything is okay. We have normalized stuttering in our communities. We have openly stuttered proudly. We have prayed incessantly for fluent speech. We have been quieted by our parents, teachers, and employers. We have rationalized being aloof, guarded, or unfriendly for fear of stuttering. We have been supported by our stuttering allies. We have tortured and afflicted ourselves. We have been united with a universal need to be heard. We have been vulnerable. We have word switched. We have explored the musical cacophony of our stuttered voices. We have zipped our lips when we wanted to share our truths. That's it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Next, our next reader will be Shannon Pagden, who I can't find on the screen. There she is.
People don't always try to seek out information on what they don't understand or don't experience themselves. So those of us who do have experiences outside of normal are often labeled with diagnosis boxes, and we're constantly left fighting against the stigma of misunderstood experiences. It often feels the world is stacked against those of us living with brains that are outside of normalcy. What with the media calling every other violent criminal mentally ill and doctors only focusing on diagnoses, despite the fact that you may be there for a different reason entirely, it's somewhat discouraging to be confident while living with mental illness. I speak close to every day about my experiences with mental health, not because I disclose to everyone upon seeing their face for the first time. My story is my platform to try and reach out to people and convince them they are not alone. I do this work as a peer advocate. I do it on weekends and the evenings with my other part-time job and through volunteer work. I also do it as an early career researcher. My story is so much a part of my daily life, it often feels like it's too deep a part of my identity that I seek to separate from. Truly, it's a sort of imposter syndrome. I find it startling that my experiences warrant the jobs I've gotten over the last few years as a peer advocate and the opportunities that have come my way, yet it's important work. I love that I'm going into a field I'm so deeply passionate about. It's hard to speak so vulnerably so often. The times I'm revisiting were the most difficult of my life, and I enjoy the months that separate me from certain aspects of my experiences, even though I can hope for it to last forever. It's hard to deal with it with poignant questions of misconception, though I do enjoy educating. And above all, it's hard to find balance between separating myself from that aspect of my life I spent a long time hating. I have learned over time to appear relatively confident, even though I'm unsure just about every time I open my mouth. It has been a journey of growth, self-confidence, and love, but I also never felt like I had much of a choice in order to love myself with this diagnosis. Disclosing was initially built primarily upon fear. I had many largely self-inflicted negative experiences early on that had me terrified to talk to anyone about it. However, if I became friends with someone as a student, it was quickly apparent that it is hard not to disclose. I would go to therapy once or twice a week. I saw a psychiatrist. I almost never drank or used any substances other than those prescribed to me, which was hard to understand for others in college. Not to mention, I took some of my medications in the middle of the afternoon and have the memory of a goldfish with a bad case of amnesia. Needless to say, it was always uncomfortable at best. After I explained to newer friends I trusted that I have schizophrenia, I could see their eyes changed. They looked at me differently, and it never went back. I was sick, I was broken, I was frightening. It was not an easy choice. I was either making up excuses and feeling bad for lying or disclosing and getting that change roll over someone's face. The I don't ever want to talk to you again, but I'll be relatively polite about it face. Whatever the reasoning, it was handled in different ways. Thanks. That's all I have.
Thank you. Our next reader will be Elizabeth Walsh.
Hi, my poems are from my practical experience and my hope to just give, hope for the world. And it's my way of coping with a lot of anxiety that I suffer with. So as we take another step into this week, may we look forward to a world that is less bleak, infusing civility with the patience and courage to truly listen to others, not just hearing, but understanding the message from all folk, sisters and brothers. It may take effort to hold back emotions to comprehend what some people say, especially when individuals or forums don't agree in thinking the same way. Words are more than a string of vocabulary defining and justifying points of view. They often become difficult to listen to, especially when opposition ensues. It can be really hard to argue fact from fiction when tempers flare, as negative emotions can cloud objectivity. It is prudent to be aware. Language can be complex and at times difficult to construe when people are convening. So pay meticulous attention to nuances and narratives to ensure the intended meaning. There is a great value of pausing before responding. It gives a bit of time for reflecting. Adopting this practice may avoid misunderstanding and the need for impartial correcting. Additionally, at times, it may be necessary to scrutinize the speaker's expressions and gestures, maintaining cognizance and careful attention to those who may be skilled in giving convincing lectures. Prior to reaching a conclusion, review and verify the authenticity of what you read and hear, as knowledge and understanding instills empowerment, not fear. In a democracy, disseminating fact from opinion is a must that strengthens the fight to instill legal justice for all, which must be primary. It is a basic human right. Improvement for life's journey requires the consistency of learning from bona fide mistakes of the past. Through acknowledgement, we can move forward to mend wounds, working towards peace that will last. When we find fault in what we see or hear, tempers can flare, causing heightened destruction, even fear. Reacting too quickly, reacting in haste, often may end up with words spoken in bad taste. One way to help lessen emotions that can escalate, causing confusion to rile, is to practice active listening, as thoughtful contemplation may take a while. Dispensing our anger in constructive ways can make us all strong when it is used to acknowledge the failures, what may have gone wrong. Being the first to say, I'm sorry for my temper rage, can often bring the conversation to a less toxic stage. But before deciding if you should agree to disagree, weigh the significance of your plea. Sometimes the argument is not worth the effort to pursue a fight, even if proving that your viewpoint may be absolutely right. Decide how you want to spend your time. More important than anything, life is uncertain and optimum health is prime. Monitoring reactions with your mind before your mouth is usually a much better way to articulate your viewpoint with confidence and pride in what you might write or say. Arguing can be a waste of time when we react rather than reflect on the problem at stake. And for many of us, patience requires practice, which is key to reducing stress, disagreement, and hate. As people of this planet, we share a common bond. As mortals, none of us can change things with a magic wand. That does not make us powerless. We are given one chance to live. Each one of us has the capacity to have empathy and compassion to forgive. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next reader, Alexandra Mendes Diaz.
My piece is called During the Days of Awe 2020. So much depends on those cows of Nineveh, the ones that Jonah won't bless. If I write every day for 5 days in a row and wake up at 7 all 5 mornings, does it mean I'm getting better as my therapist insists? So what if I write again and again about the process of writing? Last night I FaceTimed with a man I've been seeing and he asked me about the tattoo on my wrist. It's 3 letters from James Joyce's Ulysses. 2 words, I am. That's it. That's it. I don't tell him the rest of the story, the way nothing stands out from my last court appearance to mark it as distinct from all the rest. He knows nothing of arrests and plea bargains. I don't recall the last time I said goodbye to my lawyer, our 3-year relationship concluded. I do remember afterwards the nondescript bureaucratic office where I went to pay the court costs. It was a small sum, but significant to me who had been functionally unemployed for 3 years. Nonetheless, I was glad to pay it, the receipt marking with finality the end of my relationship to the Brooklyn Mental Health Court. Still, it was not enough. I had plans to go to Stacy's for dinner that evening. She knew nothing about the court or the parts leading up to it. Those who knew never found out from me. In the afternoon, I went to a tattoo parlor around the corner from my apartment. It cost $50. I brought the copy of the book that my uncle had given me for my college graduation, a mimeographed copy of the first edition. The tattoo artist had to blow up the image. He explained that over time, the integrity of the A would be lost, the space above the horizontal line filled in by ink, and at its true size, it would look always like an upside down V or the Roman numeral 5. So he enlarged it by 150% on a photocopy machine and then transferred that directly onto my wrist in ink. Here I am here. So says Abraham when God calls out for him. I can never remember which order Abraham phrases his response. Does it matter? And can we ever know with the vagaries of translation? It depends on what the Hebrew meaning of is. A literary theory professor said that to me once, and it rings in my ears still. The larger question, the one I have always wondered about, is why God needs to ask in the first place. Shouldn't the all-powerful and all-knowing already know exactly where Abraham is? Also, it's my initials, AM, so I AM, in case I ever forget who I am again. That's the only explanation I have for what happened. The body I have momentarily forgot who I am. That's not the truth, though, because I can still remember what I was thinking, and I was thinking of Abraham. Afterwards, I think of my hand attached to my arm, attached to the rest of my body, and wonder how they could have failed me so spectacularly. The movements those body parts had made, I have no memory of making those movements, but I do remember those thoughts in the moment, and I was thinking of Abraham. And isn't it true that God stayed Abraham's hand? How did my hand not stop me? I do not remember my hand moving, but I remember my mind thinking, and it is the mind that moves the hand, my mind, my hand. So too can I am be a representation of the I am, that all-important heartbeat of the English language. And so it can be this most basic reminder. I breathe, my heart beats, I live. Despite what happened, I did not die, I am. That tattoo has always been a scar. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next reader, Stephanie Carlin.
Hello, this is called My Coping Mechanism. Trigger warning, some parts are a bit graphic and may be a trigger for some people. Please listen at your own risk. A few years ago, an emergency room doctor noticed the scars on my arms during his examination. He asked me what happened, and without any hesitation, I openly and without any negative emotion in my voice, told him that I cut myself. He put his hands down, took on a more relaxed posture, and with a voice full of intrigue asked me, "Why do people do that? I've always wondered that." I was shocked. I've never had a doctor be so human with me before. So often doctors have this arrogance about them where they not only think or at least act like they know everything, but that you know nothing, even when it comes to your own body. And this seems to extend beyond just medical, biological, and physiological. It's almost like they think they are omniscient. This obviously isn't true of all doctors, but a lot, especially in my experience, emergency room doctors. I've had a few doctors over the years in various fields who have admitted that they didn't know something. However, I've never had one admit that they not only didn't know something, but that they didn't understand it either. And then he asked me to explain it to him. On top of that, I've spent my entire life feeling and being misunderstood in everything I do, say, think, or feel. As a result, I've adapted to over explaining, sometimes even before I'm actually told, either directly or indirectly, and without even being asked to explain. So when I was asked by a doctor to explain a subject in which such a seemingly small percentage of people truly understand, I eagerly took advantage of my platform. So why would someone participate in self-harming behavior? What I told him and what I tell anyone who asks is this. First and foremost, it's a way of turning at least some of the mental pain into physical pain. Physical pain is infinitely easier to deal with than mental or emotional pain. Also, it's a way of saying, look, can't you see? I hurt so bad inside that I hurt myself. It's a way of asking for needed attention and help when at a loss as to what to do. The doctor accepted my answer with a nod of satisfaction and returned to his examination. A brief note before I continue. When I say that physical pain is easier to deal with than mental or emotional pain, don't get me wrong. I am not comparing pain. I am not saying that all mental pain is always much worse than all physical pain. What I am saying is this. Your body handles the pain differently. For instance, when you break a bone, your body begins to repair it. Same with clotting blood, forming a scab, or fighting a virus. When it comes to mental pain, however, your brain doesn't know how to fix it. It reacts in all sorts of ways, such as catastrophizing. Oh my God, this is it. It's over. It's never going to get any better. I'm going to die. Or negative self-talk. You're worthless. People are treating you like this because that's what you deserve. If you weren't such a fuck up, then you wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. Your brain has been damaged and can't repair itself. When it comes to mental and emotional pain, doing nothing actually perpetuates the problem, and rather than getting better, they become worse. But fixing it isn't as easy as a Band-Aid, a cream, an ointment, a cast, or some cough syrup. Other people are also more understanding and accepting of physical problems. You don't hear people say things like, have you ever tried just not having cancer? Just go for a walk. That'll fix your broken leg like that. You just need to have a good diet and exercise regularly. That will stop your epilepsy. Heart attacks aren't real. It's just a fake science. They're just trying to get you to pay more money for doctor appointments and medications. It's just a scam. Diabetes, yeah, that's not really a thing. There's nothing wrong with you. Everyone gets a little shaky and lightheaded when they're hungry. Now finish your spaghetti so you can have the cheesecake I made for dessert. But unfortunately, when it comes to mental health disorders, we hear these things every day. I started cutting when I was about 12 years old. I was being bullied at school, something that had started my first day at that school when I was 9 years old. I wasn't quiet about it. I told people. In fact, I told all of the people that we tell kids to tell, all of the people who should have done something. My parents, the teacher, the guidance counselor, the vice principal, the principal, but no one did anything. The bullying continued, and the bullies didn't get in any trouble, ever. School was torture, and my home life wasn't much better. I was clothed, fed, and sheltered, but my emotional needs were not being met anywhere in my life. I did not feel loved, wanted, appreciated, validated, or adequate. I never measured up. I never did good enough or was good enough. I had a couple of friends that I had fun with, talked to, and laughed with, but they were not the kind of people who would listen to my troubles. They didn't understand, they didn't know what to say, and they didn't know what to do. They were far from being the popular kids, but if anything, they were just picked on a little bit here and there. Mostly, they just didn't fit in. They weren't being actively bullied like I was. I was severely depressed and extremely suicidal. My needs weren't being met, and my cries for help continued to go unanswered. But when I hid in my room with the door locked, bandages nearby, and a blade in my hand, I would be filled with an almost giddy excitement as for what was about to happen. My stomach would knot, my breath would caught in my throat. When the blade would first pierce my skin, I'd see my skin separate, and a moment later, blood appear. I'd slowly blow out the breath I was holding, and a pleasurable relief would wash over my body. It never lasted long, just a few minutes, but it was enough of a release that I no longer felt like I was going to explode. It never made anything better. It never fixed anything. In fact, whenever my mother found out that I had done it, she would get angry and I would be in trouble. She never took it as the cry for help that it really was. Same with each and every suicide attempt. Same with my entire existence. Just another problem for her to deal with. But it made it easier for me to continue. And that's why, even now, 25 years later, cutting is still one of my go-to coping mechanisms. When my needs are not being met, I'm desperate and I don't know what else to do.
Thank you. Our next reader will be Akiva Penalosa.
Hi, good evening. I'm Akiva. This will be from a memoir I'm writing called Waking Up Dead, and these are a few mini chapters. I'd like to title this first one, Abandonment. June 2019. I walked away from NYU, my 11th hospital stay in 10 years, and went straight to Tinder. There I found Jessica, a femme from Philadelphia. Jessica was an alcoholic. I pretended to not be, and so listened attentively to her issues, stifling the triggers she was setting off in me. I did not confess the truth to her because I preferred to lie and selfishly not forfeit my opportunity to enjoy a glass of red wine. And when I say enjoy, I mean guzzle. Her emotions and sexuality were a pendulum of extremes. Poly, no poly, monogamy, non-monogamy. Come to Philly, she implored. I can't see you in NYC. She had an ex-husband and 2 sons. One, at only 7, was very obviously gay. The other one was a chubby boy with mushroom hair and an impish grin. Indeed, this creature from Philly was at first kept at arm's length away from me with the purpose of guarding my heart from falling into the cycle of expectation, excitement, waiting for the shoe to drop, and then the inevitable abandonment. Said I to myself, you know better. You don't need to be in the hospital again, and you're not even that into her. From her voice, her hair, and her wishy-washy personality, I was not that attracted. I suppose others would say she was a very pretty Sarah Jessica Parker. But the bottom line for me, she was there. And I missed the one thing that had been a constant pleasure in my life, the touch and feel of a woman. Soft skin, ample breasts, hip bones, sweet-smelling hair, and the utterly heavenly dent between her shoulder and clavicle. I can sink my entire face in there and die some days. If I could choose the perfect way to die, it would be nestled between breasts. From whence I came to there I end. Craving and needing the physical, I allowed myself a quick day's journey to Philly for an all-day Sunday sexcapade. It was reckless. Perhaps upon arrival, the she would be a he. Perhaps her ex-husband would walk in. Perhaps. I shrugged off the risk as I want to do. What I found was a type A woman, a successful business owner, a mother, and an ex-wife who craved release through total sexual domination. I got out some necessary aggression, enjoyed a bed picnic of exotic cheese and prosciutto, and walked holding hands while given a beautiful tour. I even agreed to come back and spend Philly Pride with her. I had had myself a nice romp. More importantly, she had smiles on her face, and so I felt accomplished, needed, relevant in the best way I know how to be. An added bonus was that she was so into my body, couldn't stop herself from wrapping her legs all around me. Skinny women like me. The day was perfect. I met Eliza on Tinder the Sunday night I returned from Philly. The following Saturday, we ate, had a few drinks, and made out. Another small one, totally into me, and so I let her take me home. and again. And the type A who needed me begged me to dominate the hell out of her little body. I restrained myself from hurting her physically, but in the end, it would be me who would get hurt. I planned the liaison with Elisa to protect myself from having any feelings for Jessica. A few days later came the news. Jessica met someone who upended her. She canned our plans to spend Pride together, and that was that. She wasn't right for me in just about every way, but it still felt like shit to be replaced so fast. This, even though I replaced her, sorta. What I could not replace was the insidious abandonment that follows me around like a pesky STD. A most evil depression hit a week later. I went on autopilot, packed a bag, which took hours, and took an Uber to the ER at NYU. This was to be my 12th hospital stay, and I knew the drill. And anyway, I was on autopilot. What to say? 1, tell them you want to kill yourself. Then 2, tell them you have a plan. That day, mine was hanging. I had Googled best practices for hanging oneself, from how to tie the hangman's knot, to what kind of rope to use, to how long it would take to die. 2 minutes and 30 seconds, that is, if I succeeded in doing it right. The ER nurse took my info, registered just the right amount of concern, and left me sitting there. I had a 2-week stay there 3 months earlier, so I sat there fretting they wouldn't take me back. Perhaps they thought I was faking it to get attention. Perhaps they thought I had grandiose imaginings and nothing more. Perhaps. I was none the less surprised when the nurse came back and said, "We can't admit you. They won't take you back." I blushed, embarrassed that I was out and out rejected, and I asked why. "They don't think there's anything else they can do for you," she answered. Then she blushed and gave side eyes to the other nurse in a way that asked, "What the hell are they thinking, refusing this woman?" To this day, I wonder which psychiatrist refused my admittance. Was it the Angelina Jolie lookalike? Or the nerdy doc with no hair and thick black glasses? Or the petite Asian guy? I was flat out rejected. I didn't want to embarrass her further, so I dressed fast, collected my suitcase, and snuck out the double doors. At the time, I had no idea what force kept me from walking into the heavy, fast-moving traffic on First Ave. I taunted myself. "Do it," I commanded. "No," said I, and my voice of reason kicked in. "If you don't die, your crappy luck will find you paralyzed for life, and the last thing you need, Akiva, is another paralysis." Depression causes a hideous paralysis of the brain, the kind that gives rise to claustrophobia and anxiety, a medieval mind trap that clamps your muscles and your bones so they cannot move a flinch. In fact, that flinch hurts like a bitch. To simply get to the bathroom took me hours. First, I negotiated with my brain to allow me to move my foot, then to command my leg to swing to the side of the bed, then swing the other leg, then to somehow rise, then to plod like a zombie to the bathroom. I can't remember how I got back to bed, but crawling back in was like stepping into a coffin of sublime superglue. So no, I could not walk into the street and risk further paralysis of any kind. I took a gamble, as I'm prone to do, and walked the 15 blocks up First to New York Presbyterian. There, I was in a Kubrickian kind of style white cell with a narrow bed and a big window so the attendant could watch me. And just like that, I was an insect. After a few agonizing hours, 6 or 7 doctors in white coats stood in the doorway and at the window examining the whole of me. It wasn't the first time. One asked me a barrage of questions. "It's okay," said I to myself, "you're on autopilot." Soon it was pronounced that an ambulance would transport me to Gracie Square. I loathed Gracie Square. That was my first hospitalization, and remained in an angry state the whole month I was forced to stay. One night, I finally twisted up my sheets into a loser's hangman's knot and wrapped it around my neck. I stood on the bed. I looked up for anything in the ceiling that I could use. Nothing. I tugged the pathetic noose tight around my neck. Nothing. I unraveled the sheet and climbed back into bed. After I told the nurse what I had done, a few days later, victory, I was transferred to New York Presbyterian in Westchester. There, I was on the 6th floor women's ward, where I received ECT Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. The trip to the ECT suite meant a wheelchair ride through the entire facility, which is rather a majestic place in an overlooked hotel from The Shining kind of way. I remember long white halls, studded by colorful art on the high walls, and I think even an aquarium. Marie, one of the women who would accompany me, walked the 10-minute journey and was met with multiple highs and hey Maries from everyone from the cashier at the snack store to the administrators roaming about looking important. She's worked there for years, and to this day, I still cannot fathom what pleasure she gets from being around mentally ill women all day. I envy her strength. I envy her happiness. I envy her smile. I envy her energy. I envy her bliss. I'll have what she's having. The ECT suite was quite the calm place, colorful art on the wall and magazines of all sorts on the nice end tables. The actual room for the ECT was another Kubrickian white room and very small. I was ordered up on a narrow slab, hooked up to all sorts of contraptions on my skull, then penetrated with a sizable needle for the anesthesia. There were 3 or 4 doctors in there, one of them a kind Indian man. I was always excited the moment he pumped in the anesthetic. I felt my mind rise out of its casing for one glorious microsecond, then drop super fast. For some reason, I remember this quite well. Then I was awakened by kind nurses who whispered my name over and over again. I often wondered what my hefty body looked like at the moment the bolt of electricity hit my brain. As far as I remember, I felt no pain afterward. I was wheeled back to the 6th floor, ate lunch, and resumed my day of misery. I repeated this procedure a total of 22 times. 2 months later, my memory had been wiped clean. I was extremely wobbly, could no longer drive, could barely make it up the stairs to my house, and had no memory of the most arbitrary events. Whole maps were zapped out of my brain. I completely forgot how to get home, what bus to take, what subway to take. Eventually, I would take the subway into the city and spend at least an hour getting lost. I used to know my way around the city like nobody's business. I was proud of my New Yorker ability to recognize restaurants and bookstores and bars and street corners, but all that was wiped out. I left 2 hours early the few times I dared go to the city, anxious as all hell that I would miss my subway stop or take the wrong bus. I must have looked like a disturbed zombie walking the street. I shuffled along, summoning up all my physical strength to just put one foot in front of the other, in near tears. Then came the dark period. 2 months of agony where all I did was lay still in a bed in my very dark basement apartment. I went weeks without seeing the light of day and nights without deep sleep. On those nights, I got up at 1 a.m. to hit the local pub where I had a friend and a homeless man named John. I did not drink a lot, I was broke, but I thoroughly enjoyed the late night pub environment at Bukowski's. Steve, the angry drunk, Charlie, the old drunk fart, Scott, the shitty bartender, some illegal Irishmen, and a random woman named Marie. Charlie, John confided to me, was a former member of the IRA, and it was best to not piss him off. A few looked at me with some sort of disdain. Clearly, I was a lesbian. That fact alone put me at risk, but it felt surreal, like I was channeling the ghost of Hemingway by hanging out in bars all night. I felt strangely alive in a subversive, reckless kind of way. The risk excited me. On some nights, I returned home at 6 a.m. Strangely, though, I began to emerge from the 2-month depression and seclusion, and right when I was reemerging, along came COVID. The anxiety was intense. I endured panic attacks for the first time ever in my life as my fears of dying a violent death surfaced in a tidal wave of perseverative thoughts. Racing thoughts left me breathless and sleepless as the mania coursed through my brain and my body. The gabapentin, hydroxyzine, and Abilify were increased, and I endured for 3 months. I get the twisted paradox. I, who still wanted to take my own life, succumbed to the overwhelming fear of dying. There is no answer to this. So I turned to YouTube, where I found yoga guided by a friendly soul named Adrian. My body was wrecked by ECT, and it took a month just to kind of perform the moves. And with the downward dog, there were downward tears. But it's harder, even painful, to calm the storm of racing thoughts in my hyper mind without any movement in my sluggish body. So I persisted. Over time, I found the practice a daily yearning, and I even developed yoga brain, where I run through the poses in my head and imagine the stress, then the relief they give my being. My mind was slowly changing through the power of breathing and moving. I wish I could wrap all this up with a nice pink girly bow, but I'm not girly and life can suck. The battle is omnipresent. Minute by minute, hour by hour, it's exhausting to manage the ever-changing shifts in my mood. I am in no shape to have any kind of relationship, and I accept that, sort of. And with the help of therapy twice a week, I'm becoming self-protective, becoming less reckless, becoming into acceptance of the slivers of moment of peace that come through expressions of simple gratitude. Gratitude in the tiniest of acts, like the relief I feel after the simple accomplishment of brushing my teeth or washing my face. Gratitude for the sweet taste of a warm cup of hot chocolate on a cold, cold night. And gratitude for the simple beauty of feeling the purr of my trickster cat, Jack, when I pet his fluffy neck and kiss his tuxedo nose. To be honest, any day I can will myself out of bed qualifies as a good day, like today. Today is a hard day, an anxiety-ridden day, but all in all, a good day. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Tanya Robinson. And I apologize to anyone else who was paying attention to the order that I went out of order.
Oh.
Naturally broken. You think I'm fragile, as slight will break, and never mend. You fail to comprehend. I am not an egg, more holding me together than a thin shell. I don't depend on calcite crystals and keratin fibers, nor am I glass. Won't blast into a million pieces. I'll get back together. My name isn't Humpty Dumpty. I can rise again. I've had my great fall and came back upright. I can recover if knocked down, so don't worry about me. I prevail, you see. The next is a prose piece called A Story to Tell. I imagine I'm telling a story to my youngest niece. I would tell her about her mother, my sister, who took her own life when my niece was at an early age. I would tell her that her mother was special with a great personality. She saved me from bullies in elementary school. Even back then, the boys were smitten with her beauty and charm. Yeah, she was so beautiful, and I was the ugly duckling younger sister. Years later, she would still be revered. A friend of mine from college would call her a Black Barbie. When my sister died, her youngest daughter was 3. Christmas was near, and my niece was asked what she wanted for Christmas. She said she wanted a Barbie doll. I asked her which one, as there are probably dozens of Barbie dolls. She said she wanted the one that looks like mommy. I guess my sister really was a Barbie doll after all. I would tell her that her mother loved her. She was probably experiencing mental health challenges before her death, probably playing a role in her suicide. Her mother would have been happy of the young lady she became. She would have been proud of her finishing high school. I would tell her I remember her mom since she had so few memories. Today, I walk in the out of the darkness walks to fight suicides, and the NAMI walks New York City to benefit the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I walk in my sister's memory. One of my older nieces has walked with me for suicide prevention several times. I would like for my youngest niece to walk with me sometime. The next poem is Living with Stigma. Don't tell anyone about your mental illness. Just pray and God will bless. Don't spread your business. I can't express. I'm full of stress. I'm not supposed to tell. Holding in makes me yell. I'm going to hell. Can't have my say. Told to just pray. But I need more. Can't my illness ignore. Need to tell my story. Yes, I'm in therapy. Record my history. Yes, I am mentally ill, but I still have skill. I'm a Black poet, don't you know it? I'm an aunt and daughter niece, and this is just a piece. I'm in the mental health profession. I'm more than my condition. The next one is the 2 T's. I met a lady called T, just like me. Hi T, this is T. Ha 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 ha. I would laugh at me. T thought this was funny. I make her laugh. We click like butter and jam. She understood who I am. We're both living mentally ill. We come together and just chill. She didn't get weird by the count of my pills. Okay. And I have one more. This poem is called Painted in the Corner. Out of the corner, I will endure. I was on the 8th floor. They had me behind the closed locked door, shut in. My mind's rambling thoughts was a sin. Not eating became so thin, thinking the food is tainted. In the corner myself I painted. Lack of nutrients, I often fainted. I faltered behind these walls gated. The enemy, I hated it. The joy was no more. My tears would pour. All I wanted to do was go home for sure, but I needed a cure. With therapy and prayer, I started to endure. Without my family, I couldn't have done any more. I've been living a cerebellum roller coaster since 1994. I don't know what life has in store, but I know I am mentally more mature. And for me, there is a future. Now I'm stronger than ever. I won't like paper to even kids' scissors easily sever. I know I can set my mind on any endeavor. If I have my way, the hell I once lived again will never be. I found my way out of the corner. I will endure. That I take every day. No, with her, I can. Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next reader is Eleanor.
The world in my reflection. Winter break was not a beach or a ski trip. It was Africa, South America, Europe, Southeast Asia, sometimes just 3 or 4 days in a country and then off to the next. We look forward to family trips, my dad making bound books with itineraries, bits of history about where we were heading, my mom taking me and my siblings to get shots in malaria pills. These family adventures solidified us. We were often the only familiar thing in countries where the food was different, often scarce, and where a small bag of candy bought from a hotel gift shop became a treasured possession to share, not something easily acquired and devoured in 2 New York City blocks. My brother, 2 sisters, and I laughed a lot on vacations, making up rap songs and trying to hide the tape of Willie Nelson's On the Road Again from our dad, so we wouldn't pop it into the rental van's tape player as we drove on 2-lane roads over the Andes, my eyes shut to avoid peering down cliffs. My parents were adventurous then and seemed to believe the world safe enough to bring me and my siblings to South Africa as it was just breaking free from apartheid, to Papua New Guinea, where grocery stores were guarded by men with machetes. When I was older, it was offensive to show my ankles in Morocco, so my sister's mom and I brought long skirts to wear during the day and only 1 pair of shorts to wear around the hotel. But in Bali, the fruits were varieties that even my mom had never seen, and it became habit to take off my shoes to wonder at Buddhas upon Buddhas. And then we would fly home to unpack our bags, which often contained signs for local beers and sodas that roadside stores had gladly sold to my brother, whose room at home was decorated with them. We threw our clothes in the laundry and prepared ourselves to switch gears and go back to our private schools in Manhattan, often a few days late and very jet lagged. The switch was hard for me as I tried to make sense of the posters for AIDS in the markets and children begging us for pencils so they could go to school. As I got older, it became harder to switch from what I knew was out there to trying to keep up at school and bounds of social life. I became silent about the similarities of driving just minutes from our luxurious hotel past townships of rusty metal roofs and the imaginary line that ran down East 96th Street. So I stopped eating because I knew that they couldn't, and I became depressed because I felt like I wasn't helping or didn't know how. And I know now that maybe part of it was white guilt, but part of me knows that I was just a kid who saw other kids chasing after our vans without shoes on just to wave goodbye, and I saw them as my friends with nothing, Well, I had everything, and it ate me up inside. Somewhere along the way, I got lost. They haunted me, so I haunted them. I grew mean and cynical, and my light faded. And then college in New Orleans, when I began to believe that I was the Messiah trying to save the world. Perhaps a rush of rewind and fast forward of all the vacations compared to the mess my life had become. A kind social worker whom I had seen to help me through my eating disorder took me to the hospital, and I was transferred to a psychiatric hospital. After the hospitalization, I left New Orleans and came home to New York City, to my family, to doctor's appointments and side effects, to group therapy and cigarettes. After a second failed attempt at college in New Jersey, it became obvious that this was more serious than a quick fix, a poorly prescribed medication, and weekly phone sessions with a therapist. And so my real second chance began. Dr. R was an old Jewish lady with no frills. I woke up at 5:30 5 days a week and walked the mile to her office as all the construction workers were buying their coffee. Once I slumped into her brown velvet chair, I slowly opened up about the voices telling me I was worthless and cheap. I really believed the voices, but I also knew that I needed to be strong so that I could go help all the people I was carrying with me inside. I stopped drinking, swam almost every day at the Jewish Community Center, and began to volunteer for Planned Parenthood while taking classes at Hunter College. I walked imaginary tightropes on the sidewalk up 3rd Avenue to Dr. R's, and then down Lexington Avenue to get to school, knowing that one misplaced step and I'd fall off. I had absolutely no choice but to see Dr. R because my life depended on it. And then there was Dr. M, my psychiatrist and ally. It took me 2 subway lines, 1 hour on Long Island Railroad, and a taxi from the train station to Long Island Jewish Hospital to finally arrive at his office. During my appointment, I would twist and stretch the Werther's wrapper from the bowl of candy on his desk, and he would uncode my twisted thoughts and stories until he settled on my medications. And then the whole trip in reverse and repeated 2 weeks later. It took a few years to figure out my diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder, and with it, Dr. M was able to find which medications would work. After 7 years of college altogether, I graduated from Hunter. I could feel my life changing, and I slowly began to see a future for myself. I lived on my own outside Boston and then in Scotland. I found myself interested in global mental health and made a place for myself in that world. My own recovery connected me with people all over the world who are also finding that mental well-being is a way to be more kind to themselves and to others. I promised myself when I was a kid that I would go back to all those places and help. Something is changing in me during the pandemic, some sort of connection about those vacations and my now capability to do what I couldn't before. My dad's bombardment of my siblings and me with that damn tape of On the Road Again makes sense now. For half my life, I was sheltered most of the time, but then shown the world each winter. And for the second half of my life, I tried to get back to being the kid who was curious and kind, who loved elephants and the way that giraffes' necks swayed when they walked, and to the parents who had faith in our family and the world. And now I'm putting together my own playlist for when I set out on the road. And I'm scared, excited, hopeful, and so grateful to myself that I never gave up on the world.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much. I not skipped anyone else, so I'm going to pass it to our final reader, Cynthia.
This piece is called Birthday. I tell my story for my brother, that he may understand me and pass that understanding on to his daughters, my nieces, who I do not know. This year, on my 39th birthday, he sent me a video of them singing happy birthday to me. It warmed my heart, but I had to wonder if they knew who the Cindy they were singing to was, given that we have only met once in real life and a handful of times on FaceTime. So it's through writing that I'm telling my story of how mental illness is challenging, can be overcome, and is nobody's fault. That last point being perhaps the most important. There's so much that goes wrong when one is actively ill that one wishes to change afterwards, but that cannot be undone. But there's so much that one can do when well, when recovered, when in remission, made strong, made resilient, made more empathetic, afraid of less because one has gone through the scariest time and made it out alive. The biggest fear of relapsing, of returning to the hospital, fades over time as one lives and thrives and triumphs during new experiences, new accomplishments, new celebrations. I've been hospitalized a handful of times during active periods of my illness, the most harrowing being an overnight in a foreign country. The longest time was 3 months. In the hospital, you discover the diversity of mental health experiences by interacting with all of the patients at mealtimes. Some better than you, some worse, all suffering in their own way. In group therapy, you share your story and become familiar with the other patients' stories. These very intimate strangers who you paint with in the art therapy room and sit quietly with during visits from the Buddhist chaplain who hands out scraps of poetry. When your family visits, you chomp on gifts of scones from a farm bakery that doubles as a rest stop on the 3-hour journey your parents make weekly. You wait in the hospital for the new medication regimen to kick in and for you to stop thinking you're being initiated into the CIA. You've been down this delusion before, years ago, and thought you had conquered it, but it's come back around. You take the magazines on the rack and fold down the corners of pages, sending messages to imaginary couriers, not even sure what the messages are, but certain they are important, indeed. You laugh with your youthful psychiatrist as she asks, what percentage is it likely that the CIA is recruiting in mental hospitals? You watch her smile as the number goes down, 70%, 50%, 30%, 15%, 2%. Getting to zero is your proudest moment. The delusion shed like an animal molting, moving on to a new life stage, growing up. You pray to God for this medication regimen to work. You know that because your illness is biological, the most important thing is in overcoming it is the medication that changes your brain. You think about the other time your brain was broken, when you had a brain tumor, and how that was more socially acceptable, how people sent you gifts after your surgery. Hardly anyone sends you gifts during your psychiatric hospitalization because few people know about it, and you are keeping it that way as much as possible. A friend comes to visit and brings you 2 books. Months later, you have no memory of the visit. Your friend is upset you never thanked her for visiting. She ceases to be your friend. These are the missteps you make during and after hospitalization that result in people lost. But there are also people won, the fellow patient who invites you to her apartment after you discharged and gives you a sweater that no longer fits her. You lose touch over time, but still wear the sweater. You visit your favorite beach in Maine, a place you visited since childhood, and now your memories include the painting of it that you did in art therapy, showing the B&B at the end of the beach, a bucket for your treasures from the tide pools, and a starfish. You are a starfish, suctioning onto the good in life, but sharing the bad so that more people, especially your brother, can understand and perhaps help those in their lives who get stuck in this particular rut. You never tell men you're meeting for dates what you write about. You tell them, but not the truth. A version of the truth, but a hollow one. You tell them that you're writing about the mind as the ultimate home, but you don't tell them you are writing about broken, sick minds like your mind was once. Sometimes at home, you hide your pill box in the top drawer of your dresser so you don't see it. You want to take a break from the fact that your mind is controlled by medications, that without them it would fall apart or worse, become psychotic. You always lie to men by not telling them you're writing about your sick mind. But the truth is you're writing from your well mind, your recovered mind, your mind in remission, a mind made stronger by having gone through what most do not. A mind more empathetic, understanding, and less judgmental than the mind you had before the illness. A mind any man should be proud to accompany. A mind that you should share with others so that they can understand. So that one day you can know your nieces and perhaps share pieces of birthday cake with them. Thank you. I'd like to thank all of our incredible readers tonight. I think they were all incredibly moving. It's been a joy for me to get to know all of them. And I hope that they've given you something to think about and something to reflect upon, something to talk about with other people. And I'd like to thank all of you for being here so that we can share our stories and open up more conversations. And again, I'd like to thank everyone at NAMI, especially Jessica Feldman, Christina Bradley, Clara Keeley, June Romanoff, and the Queens Council on the Arts, everyone who made this possible, most of all our readers. So let's just have a big round of applause for them. Thank you so much for coming.
Cynthia, would you be willing to share the information about ordering the chapbook, if there is any information that you can share in the chat?
Yes, I will share in the chat how you can contact me. You can order a chapbook. They'll be coming out in the new year and I will ship it to you. So I'll put my contact information in the chat.
We'll also be sharing that, if it's okay with you, Cynthia, in an email to all attendees after the event. Perfect. Thank you all again so much for joining us this evening. Again, my name is Clara. I have put my email in the chat, but if you have any follow-up questions, you can reach out to me at CKIELY@NAMI-NYC.org. And Cynthia is going to, and Cynthia's contact information is also in the chat, Cynthia-Marie O'Brien @gmail.com. And we'll be sending that out after the event as well. So thank you all again so much for joining us. Another round of applause to Cynthia for facilitating this workshop and making all of this happen. Thank you all.